Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. It's on. Let's watch.
Listen. Your room is entire evening for your mom, for your grandma.
Okay, so I don't know what I was hoping for, but we're seeing a pattern that he engages in. I think we're going, or at least I think we're hearing what he does when he was on that phone call, right? It's like, so he finally gets her on the phone, and instead of saying, look, I'm sorry I brought that up about the thing, it's you're ruining, and again, the triangulation is just absurd here. It's like he's saying, you ruined it for your mom, your grandma. Look what you're doing to them. Not look what you're doing to me, or here are my feelings. So I think we're going to be heading into that kind of abuse. This is, I have to ask them what's really happening to really apply the label of abusive, but at the very least, this is emulative of an abusive relationship in that you have the badgering, you have the cycles, you have her progressing down a road of eventually doing this where she just runs away. She's just like, I know where this is headed, and I'm, boom. And then now maybe in the end, it'll be revealed that there is some shadiness there from her and she's running because she's guilty or something. It doesn't look like that, but who knows? Anyway, so then he finally gets her on the phone and it's badgering. You ruined it. There's something wrong with you. Now, given her history and even some of the things she said about her own personality and her own tendencies, I think that this abusive language ties in. It confirms how she believes who she really is. I think she thinks she deserves to be treated this way. So there's a part of her anyway. And so I think for her, there isn't, if she hadn't been relationally traumatized in the way that I think she has, Liz, the very first time this happened, she probably would have separated or broken up or something. But given her abuse history, it makes it much less likely for her to be able to detect it. And also, there might even be some satisfaction. When you have those ideas about yourself, there's a part of yourself that actually is constantly berating yourself anyway, because you have this internalized voice from someone else. Or you were treated in such a way that made you believe that about yourself. And so you have this internalized voice. And sometimes you actually will create situations subconsciously to project, this is projective identification, to get rid of that inner voice, that side of things onto other people. You might even act in subtle ways to provoke that in other people. You might choose people that are like that so that the voice is actually coming from the outside. It originated from the outside when you're growing up. You internalize it. Now it's doing it to yourself on the inside. You don't like that. You want it to be on the outside. It's not great when you're being treated this way. You ruin things. You're immature. You're a problem. You're a terrible human being. But it feels better, at least in terms of the psychoanalytic model, it feels better for it to be on the outside than for it to be on the inside. Plus, then at least you can look at it and fight with it. Whereas if it's on the inside, you're fighting with yourself, right? If you believe it to be true, then it is true. Whereas if it's on the outside, you can attack it and you don't have to think about the fact that you actually believe it yourself, if that makes any sense. So I'm not saying she's causing the abuse, but it could be a factor in her interpreting this situation as normal and as acceptable and or as something to repeat. Because, they were broken up 8 times, and there was that time when they were broken up for months and they were on that tell-all. They hadn't been in a relationship for a long time. Why would someone go back to that? I don't know about her, but I've treated many people, and I've had people in my personal life, and of course we're all prone to projective identification, that when we understand our interjects, our internalizations, we can explain sometimes why we engage in behavior that is very much against our interest. And then that gives us something to work on, something to actually change. So if that were true, which I can't know for Liz, if she identified in therapy, oh yeah, I was treated with abuse and then I internalized that and now I'm doing it to myself, and I tend to recreate that in various different ways through projective identification. And the solution to that is to become aware of that, and also to try, so you can combat it. Knowledge is power. It also explains who I fall in love with and da-da-da. But then I want to minimize this interject while bolstering, this is my model of object relations, by the way, it's my way of wording it anyway, and I want to bolster other interjects, other internalizations that maybe need more bolstering, like I'm worth it and I'm okay. And I am deserving of love, and I do deserve to express my feelings, and I don't deserve to be treated that way. Anyway, listen to all my episodes on protective identification for more info on that.
Good night.
You want to talk to him?
Liz, you're ruining the entire.
I also find it interesting that he walks in, I think, away from the camera because I think he might want to be his true self, because there was the him version on camera with Rose and Liz, which was not great, but we heard that phone call, which was not around the cameras, and I think he wants to maybe get into some of that language, which you could argue he did.
Even for your mom, for your grandma, you are out of control, you're drunk.
Shut the up. Don't pinpoint on the fact that I'm drunk, Ed. You don't give a. You know what? When it comes to Alex, when it comes to the photo shoot, you praise her on her beauty. You tell me that I've gained weight and I've gained weight?
Yeah, so a lot of her issues are coming out right now, which is justified. But again, if I were a little therapist on her shoulder, I'd be like, yeah, if you want to let him have it, let him have it. If you want to break up with him, break up with him. The key here, Liz, is that you hold on to this and you remember this and you address it and you don't deny it and you don't avoid it when you sober up or when he starts being nice. That remember this moment where you're angry, where you feel like he is being hurtful to you, So, because I think that's the pattern for the two. I think they're both on kind of a cycle that for her, she will have these outbursts and she might even go too far in terms of her scale, if you will. I think it's justified given what we've seen, but I think she might go a little far sometimes. And then the next day she feels like she went too far and then she apologizes. And then she's like, oh, I was drunk or, can't deal with it. And then there's a cycle to her as well. And what I would hope for is more balance, more addressing all the things all the time, not denying, not suppressing, and then exploding.
You know what? Have a good night.
Liz, you're embarrassing yourself.
I'm not embarrassing myself. You're so jealous over someone who was attracted to me.
Liz, you're drunk and there was something going on there. She was getting physical with you.
Yikes. If this was all that we had to go on, I would be pretty confused and I would have a lot of like, well, who knows what's wrong. But hearing that conversation, it's definitely in that category. And we've seen other things along these lines, even this season, where he's like, yeah, she's being immature and she's a little baby wah-wah, that kind of thing. And it's an attitude of superiority. It's an attitude of, it's okay to harm others with words. And he's like, you're drunk, you ruined things. If you've been abused verbally, you probably already turned it off because this is too triggering. Or if you've been through enough therapy, maybe this isn't as triggering. But if you've been emotionally abused, verbally abused, you know exactly what is happening right now. It's this unrelenting, self-assured attack of your character, just berating you from all angles, right? And I think for Liz, she's heard it so many times. Well, I don't know though, because she's been through this so many times and she keeps going back. So, oof.
No, she wasn't.
Something's going on there. You don't want to tell me what's going on.
So, you notice how the camera's trying to see him? Because I think is if the camera people know that if Ed sees the cameras, he will try to get away. And now, of course, he's mic'd up, I think, or at least there's enough of a microphone to be able to catch it. Anyway, so I think they know that he's going to run away because I think he knows that he is not looking very good right now, that he is actually going into a zone that he knows is not flattering. And now Liz was trying to get away, and I was actually saying, please let her get away. But with Ed, I feel the opposite of like, don't let him get away because the power structure is such that the victim should be given grace and given space, but the abusive person should be outed for who they are.
That's fine. I'm telling you right now, Liz, until I know everything I need to know about you, I can't marry you. I'm going to be honest.
You know what's going to happen?
So he says, I can't marry you. And he said things along these lines before. I think for him, he did this with Rose. I think he thinks his marriage, him marrying someone is this massive gift that he is giving someone, that he's giving someone his fame, and particularly with Rose, right? That he's giving her this wonderful life. And to some extent, it was true. I mean, the circumstances under which Rose was living prior to meeting Ed was, now you look at the house, the circumstances of the house, and that was one thing. But really, the issue was, I think, the educational system in her town, the security, police, which might not even exist in her small town, the economic opportunities for her family, for her kid, it could have been actually like that. And so Ed thinks like, look, you owe me. And we all understand that you're desperate to marry me. And so I'm going to use that card right now to outrank you. And so we can know that, look, you need to shut up, because if you don't comply, I'm not going to marry you. And he's doing it to Liz. I think for Liz, she, for emotional reasons, has a similar susceptibility and vulnerability to that communication, that rejection. It was like, no, please, I'll comply. But I think for her, she might be beyond that point. I don't know. I have a feeling they're going to get back together. And this is just, they've probably, who knows, but I wouldn't be surprised if they've been through this fight, say 40 times, and only 8 of those times did they actually break up, or maybe even a lot more than that. But much more numerous times have they been in a fight just like this. And so there's no way for us to know, is this like one of the regular fights, or is this a breakup fight? And even if it's a breakup fight, they still get back together, right?
You're drunk, and there was something going on there. She was getting physical with you.
No, she wasn't.
Something's going on there. You don't want to tell me what's going on. That's fine. I'm telling you right now, Liz, until I know everything I need to know about you, I can't marry you. I'm going to be honest.
You know what's going to happen? We're fighting. You're going to contact Richard tomorrow. You're going to contact Tiffany. You're going to contact Norma and say, oh my God, you were so right about.
Right. So she is smart to be able to say, you know what? I've been down this road. I know what's going to happen. If I were her therapist, and hopefully, does she have a therapist? My goodness, that she'd be able to sift through what's happening, because she seems really locked in on his friends, on Richard and his mom and daughter. So, in her head, she's like, you're going to go to Richard and you're going to talk with them. And so that is worrisome to me, that who cares what he says to these other people? Like, of course he's going to say all sorts of distorted things to these other people. He's massively distorted when he's talking to you. God knows what he's saying to these other people. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just in the moment she's going to that place. But at the very least, I'll commend her for sure for being able to see a pattern. It's like, I know we've been down this road before.
Her.
Liz, leave the ring and pack your stuff and move out. You're not ready to get married.
Yeah, ick. This is very similar to the conversation we heard. It's, I think, toned down a little bit because he knows he's being recorded to some extent. So, ick. Pack your stuff, drop the ring, move out. You're not ready to get married. What is that? He says that kind of phraseology around that. Like, you're not good enough for me, I think is what he's trying to say. That you're not mature. That's the way you talk to a kid or an employee or something, right? Like, okay, put down that knife, if you're a cook. Put down that knife. You're not ready for the big leagues, little girl. You've got to do some more training. It just has that vibe. It's awful.
I'm not ready to get married. You don't even know what a marriage is, Ed.
I want to marry you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. But until I know everything about you, Liz, I can't. I'm not going to. We can't. That would be foolish. There
it is. So that's what I was yammering about earlier. He has those feelings I'm thinking, which are not his fault, but they're there. It is his fault what he does with it after that to some extent. And so he feels a threat frequently because of what happened to him way before he ever met Liz. And he has a feeling of worry and danger and of abandonment around the corner. And then a long flow chart eventually leads him to a very, very common defense, which is, I need to know everything about you. You have to tell me everything about you. That was with Rose. He's badgering her about her previous relationship with the father of her child. I need to know everything about that. I need to know everything about that. I need to know if you've had an STI. I need to know everything about that. I need to know everything about that. I need to know everything about everything in your past. And I'm guessing for Rose and for Liz, it feels invasive. It feels abusive. It feels weird. Like, why? If I told you information from my past, would that really solve the problem? Because she might have even done that in the past. Who knows? But yeah, the lack of insight that Ed exhibits, like you'd think, especially people on the show, they've watched themselves on the show, right? That if you're Ed, you're like, why was I badgering Rose so much about a past relationship that is long over, and there was no evidence to believe that Rose was cheating on me? Why was I so insistent? That's such a weird thing. You would just imagine you would do that and learn from it and go to therapy for it, but c'est la vie.
And you're hiding something. And I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out about it. And the way that she was reacting to you was how a girlfriend would react to a girlfriend.
Yikes. Just now, is there some homophobia in there? I don't know. But there's that. And there can be that with some men. It smells of that a little bit, where some men, some heterosexual men who are in heterosexual relationships will learn that their partner had past relationships with women. It can have a particular threat to some men. If you have insecurities, it can trigger this sense of, well, if you want, and I guess this can go any direction for women involved with men who have had a past with men. I think if you are insecure, it can make you feel like, well, you don't want to be with me because I'm not a woman. And thus, I will never be able to compete with that because I'm not a woman. And so that will always be a threat. I will never be good enough to you. Because I think for some men in particular, for some people's paradigms, they can't compete with another gender because they can never be that other, you know what I'm saying? So I think there's that thing that it can kind of trigger. Also, I think for the Eds of the world, it can feel like, well, I thought I was only competing with X amount of people. Now there's a whole other group of people I'm competing against, and I have to watch you around. I think also another worry that the Eds of the world will have is like, well, normally I would control you by saying you can't have men friends, but now you can't have any friends because you might get together with anyone. So I think there's a variety of reasons as to why undifferentiated, insecure individuals might be particularly tripped up by having a partner that had a history, or at least had a statement. We haven't even heard from Liz as to whether or not she is bi or that she has been with him. All we heard was that Ed said that when he broke up with her, she said, you make me want to be with women because of how horrible this is going, you know? So that's all we have, right? We have, and if that is all that it is, imagine being in Liz's shoes where you're like, what? As a kind of a joke, out of frustration, I was like, maybe I shouldn't be with men anymore because I can't take it. And that's all I said to him. And now he believes, like, that wouldn't be a stretch.
It was a physical reaction. She was grabbing you. Liz, are you there?
The other thing to think about is there's a possible narrative here that seems quite likely, that Liz went through something really rough at their joint party for their engagement. And one of Liz's friends was unfair and really uncool to the point where Liz had to ask security to escort her out. So Liz is a victim, or at least went through something really difficult. And you turn the corner and you see your beloved and you're hoping to get some support. Instead, you get this. Just imagine if you're in Liz's position. You're just like, really? I just went through something really horrible. And all you can do is focus on the fact that a woman was angry at me and it looked romantic to you. And now we're off to the races of you abusing me. Like, that's a possible scenario. Just imagine being in Liz's shoes if that's what happened. Now, I want to hold out for the possibility that we will learn in a future episode that there was something going on or something, and that changes a lot of what I've said, kind of. I don't think it changes the bulk of what I've been saying, but I can't know, and I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Liz, leave the ring and pack your stuff and move out. You're not ready to get married. And you're hiding something. Liz, are you there?
So the party was going great until Liz's ex-coworker showed up at the engagement party, and I'm convinced that she liked Liz in more of a romantic way.
All right, so there's this other aspect of homophobia that I should mention here and comment on, which is that there's a lot of people that believe that gay people, lesbians, are constantly wanting to steal their partners away from them, that kind of thing. And I'm old enough to remember this notion being mainstream. Now, is she bi? There's so many questions that are really irrelevant to what's happening right now. Like, all that, none of it matters. It doesn't matter if Liz is bi. It doesn't matter even if that other coworker, that person was lesbian. What we have heard is that, in terms of what we've been given in terms of the data, that Ed is completely making up a story in his mind about what is happening and has no data to back that up, and is, instead of going to her and saying, look, so let me provide a more healthy way that Ed, I believe, given what I believe to be what's happening, he could have, after the party, gone to her and said, so I know you went through a fight with your ex-coworker and that was awful, and I'd love to hear more about that. But given my issues, I feel like I have to get something off my chest, and I would like some reassurance here. I want to start this off by saying you did nothing wrong. This is all on me. This is my issues based on my past, and I've gone to therapy enough and I know them well enough to know that because I've been abandoned a lot, I've been rejected a lot, I have this assumption that abandonment is around every corner. And when I saw you fighting with your ex-coworker and I knew that she was a lesbian, it made me paranoid that maybe you had been in a relationship with her. Now, I know that's ridiculous because there's no data for me to think that, but that's where my brain goes. That's where my emotions go. And for a time, I was convinced that that was true, but I've been through enough therapy. I have enough differentiation. My support system is there for me, such that I was eventually able to differentiate and say, I have no data to back that up. So this is completely unfair to you. And yes, I'm jealous. And yes, I have issues. And I'm sorry that I do. But as a part of my recovery, and I've talked about this with my therapist, and we've talked about it in couple therapy, that when I go through this, you can help me in a variety of ways. You don't have to, but you could really help me by telling me maybe a bit about that relationship, maybe reassuring me that you don't want to be with her and that you want to be with me, or that you're not cheating on me. If you could maybe make me feel secure in that way, I don't know. Or just, can you just hold me and tell me that you love me? Maybe that'll help, or something like that. Okay. I have helped couples, jealous people, do that. You know, the model of helping people with jealousy often, particularly in our society, is you just tell jealous people they can't be jealous. Like, don't be jealous. Or there'll be these little things that people are supposed to hold on to, of just like, well, if you have a suspicion, because sometimes I'll hear this, people will say, well, if you have a suspicion often that your partner is cheating, then they probably are. You'll hear people do that. It's like, oh, it's a gut feeling. And I'm like, no, do not go off your gut feeling. Like, listen to it and, regard it, but our gut feeling is not a good indication necessarily of what's happening in reality, particularly given our relational histories, right? For Ed, he has a gut feeling that she's constantly cheating on him. It's probably not accurate. We can't know that for sure, but probably not. Anyway, that's one of the ways that I help people to help, deal with their we can't just erase someone's relational traumas and tendency for jealousy and paranoia and distortions. We can't just take that away. And we can't ask that person to just suppress and deal with it on their own. But if we help people be self-aware enough and they trust their partner enough to lay it all out that way, just imagine if your partner came to you with that, the way I role played it earlier. You'd be like, oh my God, thanks for saying all that. But whatever I can do to help you to feel reassured that I love you. And no, I mean, she's a lesbian and we never had a thing at all. And what we were fighting about was these other things. I mean, maybe she likes me, but I don't have any, she never said anything. There was no indication of that. And so there's that. And no, I want to be with you. You're a great person and I love you. And you're the only person I want to, whatever it is that could begin to help the jealous person deal with their problem that is theirs alone. And it's not the partner's fault. Ed did not do that, of course. He did another strategy, which led to this. Okay, well, that's that episode in which I react to that portion of that reality TV show, and it was interesting. Did you think it was interesting? I thought it was interesting. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.